So happy Saturday, everyone. I'm here. My name's Greg Dixon. I'm here with Margo Arrowsmith, the creator of Your Perfect Retirement Living. And we've been talking about various options for your retirement, for you or your loved ones, starting from staying in your own home to going to assisted living or independent living or even living on a cruise ship. But today we're going to talk about the Golden Girls option for retirement living. And Margo, let us know what you have in mind for that.
Well, I actually wanted to discuss there's two kinds of Golden Girl options. First, though, let me say if somebody wants to look it up, probably what you should probably do, because there's lots of different articles on it. Google Golden Girls senior housing, and you'll find lots of good stuff. But you may not have to, because we're going to give you a lot of great information today. But I want to talk first about the shared housing, which is what we think of with Golden Girls, because that's what they did on TV. The pros and cons, but again, depending on who you are, that's what the pros and cons are going to mean to you, and that's what's important. The other is co-op housing, which is it's a little different, but I think we need to talk about that today also. But I'm going to start with the resurgence of Golden Girl housing, the true Golden Girl housing, where people are sharing, living together. We generally think of it as being women. I think women might do it better. I don't know, maybe not. I've never heard of any men doing it. Maybe it would be a good idea for them also. But typically, and it can happen in an apartment, it can happen in a house. But there's two ways of doing it, and both again, like with everything else, both have the pros and their cons. We tend to think that the reason people do this particular kind of housing is because it's less expensive, and it certainly is. Around here, a 3-bedroom apartment goes for close to, oh gosh, it can go for around $2,000 for a 3-bedroom apartment. It's gotten, can't believe it, but it is. So if you had 3 people there, it would be under $700 a piece, which would be great. However, if one person was renting a 1-bedroom apartment, and around here that can be anywhere from $1,300 to $1,500, you can already see that the cost is twice as much. So cost is certainly a reason to do Golden Girl housing. But another reason is sometimes some people don't like living alone. They don't want to go to a big housing complex or like a independent living, which, by the way, is also extremely expensive, like $5,000 a month. Excuse me. But they also don't want to be totally alone. They like the idea of having somebody there when they wake up in the morning, or somebody to go with them when they have their colonoscopy, all sorts of things. And of course, this can be done in a few ways. And I'm going to revert every once in a while back to the TV show, because, we've all seen it. We all loved it. Most of us have seen many of the episodes multiple times and know exactly what's going on. I am sorry, folks. In the show, they lived in a house in Florida where one of the women owned the house. And it usually worked out. I think for all of the many years that show was on, there was only a couple of episodes where there was an issue where Blanche was kind of like, well, it's my house, folks. We got to do it my way. And they didn't emphasize that a lot. And that's the ideal. The ideal would be if the person who owns the house realizes that the renters, whether it's 2 or 3 people, are enabling her to stay in her house and keep her house, that makes it a little more equitable. It isn't just, it's my house and I'm letting you live here. That can be a problem. So if you're going to do that and you're going to move into somebody else's house, you want to get a good feel for that. How much equality of can people get? Years ago, by the way, when I was in college, and I was in college when I was 27, so I was grown up, and I rented a house with 3 other women, and it wasn't actually that good. I mean, it was many good things about it, but the woman who owned the house had no qualms about saying when we could have a party, when we couldn't, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not saying even if you find someone like that, if that's okay with you, again, I want to refer you back to my course, the Your Perfect Day exercise, because that might be okay. You might not care. But if it matters to you, that's one thing to look out for. Um, but that can be done, by the way, it can be done in a house, it can be done in an apartment. And as with TV shows, of course, there had to be some conflict every week, but there doesn't necessarily have to be any. But you want to be real clear about what kind of people that you can live with and what kind of people you don't live with. For instance, if you like to play a lot of old time rock and roll music and you don't like wearing earbuds, you like to have the music going, and the woman you're considering living with likes classical music and she doesn't like earbuds, that can be a problem. Now, it can be solved by both of you saying, you know what, I'll wear headphones. We'll do it. But if you're with somebody who's kind of not giving around that, but music, by the way, is a way that you can, when you're interviewing possible people, you can kind of get an idea. Is this a person who knows how to compromise? If it's somebody who said, absolutely not, I want this kind of music, and the only way to play it is, with speakers blasting, there might be other problems with that person also. So again, you want to look for ways where that you and these people are going to blend together, because it can be wonderful. I know people who love it very much. It can also be a little difficult. And I want to separate this, by the way, the shared housing from renting a room from somebody. And I had a patient a while back who was renting a room from a woman, and the woman, was very nosy, according to my patient. And she, thought she thought they must eat meals together, which my patient didn't want to do. She was definitely one of those people who wanted to make all the rules, but even the setup of it was more, I'm renting a room from this person. Now that could work, by the way. And matter of fact, one of the things I might do someday is look up, this is another kind of shared housing, a little bit different, but I might look up, there's an organization of traveling nurses. They travel all around the country. They're any particular place between 3 and 6 months, but they travel according to where the need is for nursing. They get paid a little more, so they do quite well. And there are women who love it. And of course, they're of all ages. They could be young, they could be 60, they could be of all ages. But while they're doing this, they rent rooms in people's houses. If you've never lived with someone like that, or at least haven't since you were in college, since you were a kid, and you're a little leery about it, traveling nurses might really be and you have your own home, whether you rent it, by the way, because renters can also sublet a room, but whether you rent or own, traveling nurses or an organization like that might be a way for you to start. If you have a nurse that comes into your home for 3 to 6 months and you're like, oh, you know what? I want my home to myself again. Traveling nurses is great because, well, you signed a contract for 3 to 6 months, so you're stuck there. But at the end of that contract, that person does leave. You don't have to worry about evicting somebody, which, by the way, if you want to do shared housing and it's your house, do understand that it's not an easy thing to evict someone from your house. Greg, you have something to say.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that Bonnie and I have friends in the
Yes.
Seattle area, and they call themselves the Golden Girls.
Yeah.
So they have it's one person's house, and then one of the people who has a place there also has a condo in Hawaii, and she used to have a bunch of rental houses, but she got rid of all the houses, and so basically she has a place to call home when she's in the Seattle area, and otherwise she's not there. And I have another story. We're staying with my brother.
I need to ask you a question. Do these women that live with her in Seattle also get to go to Hawaii?
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, that is just the benefit of having a place in Hawaii is people generally like to go visit.
And go ahead. I'm sorry, Greg.
Yeah, no, and the other funny story is we're staying with my brother in a little town called Merritt, British Columbia, and he has a friend who's a long haul trucker, and he comes through town once in a while. So for a while there, he rented Doug's couch, right? He'd come sleep on the couch. Yeah. But now when he's coming through, we'll go meet and have coffee with him or something. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that in. There's so many different ways to do it. But again, what I caution people, no matter what they're going to do, is number one, know yourself, know how this is going to fit into what you're truly looking for, and then make sure that everybody's real clear about what the boundaries are, who's going to be responsible for what, and all of that. And if those two things fit together for you, this is a wonderful solution for so many people. And again, if people sometimes people go into independent living, for example, not because they want to, but because they don't want to be alone. Well, but it's also very expensive. It's like $5,000 a month minimum. Well, shared housing is a way to for much less money and without having so many people around you, and having a
Yeah.
little more variety.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think and, depending on your family situation, some, almost some ethnic backgrounds are more inclined to do that than others. We some groups just like they push their kids out and they don't want them back, and others won't let them out of the house, so
Well, yes, exactly. I remember I'm a big fan of the TV show The Closer, and there's a detective on there, Sanchez. He's Mexican, Mexican American, but his name is Sanchez, and they're at actually an assisted living, solving a murder there. And he walks in, he says, this just kills me. He says, white people spend all this money to store, that was his word, to store their old people. He says, we just put carpet in the garage and everybody's welcome. So that's kind of a little bit what you're talking about.
yeah, along those lines, like what happens in Vancouver, there's a large Indo-Canadian population, and what they tend to do is somebody buys a big house and everybody lives in there, and
Yep.
then as they get established, they buy the next house. Next thing you know, they they own all of Surrey. So
They own a lot. I had back when I was working, I was helping people do Russian adoptions, and this couple, they were childless, but they wanted to adopt 4 siblings, and everybody's like, "Oh, you can't do that." Well, she had grown up in Chicago. In her parents, and I think the parents were both cousins, so they were like double first cousins. It was like two siblings married 2 siblings. Anyway, but they bought a duplex, two two houses pushed together, but it was just the 2 houses, and they had a bunch of kids, and both men and one of the women went to work, and one of the women stayed home and took care of all the kids. So, I mean, that's not what you're going to be doing in retirement. Probably not. But yeah, there's just so many different ways of doing it, and it works out so well. And that, by the way, helped these people be able to adopt 4 siblings because she was used to living that way.
yeah, no, that it's absolutely fabulous. I too know 2 siblings, and then their kids too. There's 2 generations. I
Yeah.
think maybe there might be 3 generations. So
Yeah.
whatever floats your boat. But you also said something related to was co-op housing.
Co-op housing. All right.
Yeah,
Co-op housing is more like what we think of when we think of 55 plus.
yeah,
At 55 plus is like, like Del Webb. I don't know what they call it in Canada, but Del Webb is a big company here where they buy a lot of land. They build a lot of single family houses for older people and older couples. And then they usually have amenities such as a swimming pool, and they'll have a clubhouse and a lot. It depends. Of course, it all varies. Or sometimes 55 plus housing can be in a high rise building, and sometimes you buy into it, sometimes you rent. That's 55 plus housing. Co-op housing is kind of the same thing, except you do it yourself, and usually it'll start out with a group of friends who are compatible. They've known each other for a long time, and they think, well, let's do this ourselves, because buying into or even renting 55 plus housing, again, many people love it, but it can be expensive. But if you do it yourself, if you either buy the land and build your own houses, or buy a building, there was a group in Durham, North Carolina, that bought I think it was a 16-unit apartment building, and they all moved in. I mean, they all owned part of it. Um, And of course, again, it was much less expensive because there wasn't a company that needed to be making a lot of money off of it. So, and they enjoyed it. Now, of course, there's also drawbacks with that, and one of them is, just because you're friends your whole life, as neighbors or as people who lived in the same town, sometimes living closer together where your property values are more intertwined, it can make a little bit of a difference. So again, if you're thinking about doing that, um, make sure that everybody's real clear about the responsibilities, about who's responsible for what, about who gets to do what when. Uh, and like I said in the course, I gave a big section of that about, for instance, some people want to have their grandchildren over every day. Some people move to 55 plus housing because they don't want kids around. So you want to talk to your friends. I mean, are we all looking at this the same way? However, it can be wonderful. And again, it can be less money than moving into a building that some company's done. Problem is, there's a couple of problems though involved in that. Is number one, you have to do all the work. You have to find the land. Which often, you get a good real estate person, you can do that, but you have to oversee the building, or in the case of these people who bought the apartment building, you have to oversee the renovations. You're responsible for all those things, and there might not be as many amenities, although you could
Yeah.
maybe make it that way. Also, if one of your friends leaves for whatever reason, either they've gone on to another world or they just moved, how are you going to decide who gets to move in their place? So there's a lot of things to consider. So I'm not telling anybody to go out and just jump and do it, but it's something a lot of people might be very interested in.
Yes. Speaking of Golden Girls, here's one now.
Yes, my very
and,
favorite Golden Girl.
and I think she has some experience in this area.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I would say that sharing resources with other people can be a great way to enrich your life. And I personally lived in groups of people in my early life all the time. And then I went through an experience of living basically by myself, but with a lot of visitors for a number of years. And now I'm in a house that is shared with other people, and it's really working for me because we're around. We were just kind of around for each other. There's not any big agenda for us to get together, and we can just support each other on a casual level, like, hey, good morning, how's it going? Oh gosh, blah blah blah, or hey, wow, this is happening, and these are things that can stimulate your emotional and mental atmosphere. And for me, as a creative person, I'm finding this is a great thing to be doing at this point in my life. I will say that it's not always a good idea to move in with people. My previous housemate was a lovely person, great values, and then it turned out that our way of approaching living together was very different. Of course, that was also influenced by the fact of the pandemic. But as Margo said, you need to be really clear about what you want out of the relationship, and you don't really know how people's personalities are going to affect one another. For example, I'm a creative and artistic type, and I have a certain kind of way about me. And the people that I'm living with now, we make allowances for the fact that we're all kind of individually weird in our own way, and it's it's just a given, right? Don't expect normal. We don't do that here. And so that is very cool for me. It really works in supporting my life.
And as you're talking, I describe myself, I'm an introvert who likes people, but I need my time. I need my space alone.
Exactly.
So, but that could be done with shared housing, because as long as I had a couple of rooms all to myself, where, if I was there and maybe, if people understood that if I was there, I was probably okay. And that's where I needed to be. But the ideal would be is when I did want to, socialize, which I like people, I like to socialize.
Yeah.
People would be there for me to do it with. I wouldn't have to, go to some place where I'm kind of playing the lottery as to whether or not there'll be anybody there that I want to talk to. I will know the people there. So even for an introvert like myself, shared living could be a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have a door, you can close your door if it's time for you to be alone. And then, you can open your door and see if somebody else's door is open.
Exactly,
You know,
exactly. But
and that works.
it needs to be where people understand that before you get together. And it doesn't mean there'll never be a hurt feeling or a conflict, but that as long as people have basic understandings of what it's going to be and what it's going to be like.
Right, right. Well, a little story. Before I moved in here, I called the woman whose house it is, who I'd known for quite a long time. We didn't know each other well, and but we could see that there was, a possibility of something good happening. And then she said, "Well, just because you move in doesn't mean you're automatically my best friend." And I went, "This could work."
Yes. Oh, did someone say that is so wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. That made me go, okay, that's boundaries right there. We know what we've got,
And at the same time, she might say that also to a perfectly nice person, but whose feelings would get hurt by that. Well, then that's clear. Those two people, they're both lovely people, but should probably not be living together because they don't understand each other in a way that would behoove them being together.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that turned out to be really good. And in fact, that leaves room for people to learn to understand each other better. And we've had some really fantastic conversations about shared experience and new experiences. That it's been a great experience.
Great. How many people are there in your house, Betty?
Well, it's a total of 4 here on the property. We got a large house, a small house, and a not a travel trailer. What would you call it? I guess it's a travel trailer, but it's a big one. So,
small house. Are you talking about a smaller house or one of those tiny houses?
It's what they call a granny unit in this town. It's a lot of the places have this, a second smaller house out behind, and so it's a great thing because different people have different styles too.
When I bought my first house in Raleigh, in the backyard, there was a 2-story garage, which had I think it was 750 square feet between, 250 on top and 500 on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents put in 2 bathrooms and a kitchen. They made a lovely apartment out of it. And we all just assumed that when it came time to sell the house, that would be a big plus. Well, because this is one of the problems. In America, we're so designed to, we got to be alone. We've got to have this thing to ourselves that a lot of people who came to look at it were like, what do we do with this? It really kind of hurt me selling it, but it was too bad because it was ideal for having another person. It was great for me and my friends. We both had privacy, but yet my parents, we both had privacy, but yet there we were. And it would have been perfect for having friends come to live. But so people kind of also have to be educated into learning how to do it.
So along those lines, in the Vancouver area where there's quite a housing shortage, most municipalities have changed the bylaws, so it makes it easier to have what they call a laneway house or a carriage house.
Yeah,
good.
And I've known people who have set up their garage. They had like an artist studio in their garage, and then they just moved in there and rented out the house, right? So
yeah, I know people who do that too.
Yeah, well, my parents made such a great apartment. I would have been happy doing that too, because yes, we don't have to have the big house to be happy.
Yeah, it's true. Less can be more. I can tell you that for sure. After running 45 acres for 46 years,
well, yes,
getting simple can be very, very refreshing.
Yes. Well, so again, this is something that's available to people. Something to really think about, as long as you're really sure that you know how something is going to fit into your desired lifestyle.
Yeah. And along the lines of what Greg just mentioned, in California, there's an acute housing shortage, and there was a state law that overrode all of the municipal laws that may have prohibited people from creating what here is called additional dwelling units, or ADUs.
Right.
Yeah. And so, if you decided to have a tiny house in your backyard and rent it out, your city can't tell you that you can't do that any longer.
Well, we still have that problem here. As a matter of fact, when I had my, that beautiful 2-story apartment in my backyard. They let us do it because they were my parents, so they considered us one family. But they did say, if because mom and dad were, you'll have this to rent out, it'll, perfect life for you. But all we would have had to do was to connect it somehow. Like literally, we could have taken a 2x4 and connected the two houses, and that would have made us legal. So you kind of want to look at it. But yeah, I think housing is getting so expensive around here that they may have to start looking at it differently also.
And there's another thing that a friend of mine who lives a few blocks away, her son and his fiance moved into their house. In the back part of their house, they put a partition up, and it's a win-win for everybody because they are getting a small amount of rent. The kids have a better place, a better living situation. And as she put it, later on we could swap. We could take the smaller place and they could take the bigger place. So, intergenerational living, I think, is something that we really need to re-examine. I was just actually visiting my son in San Diego, and he said, I think the nuclear family thing is really, it's not serving our population well. Even while I'm doing it myself. But it's true that when there's more than one entity sharing space, we can do things for each other, support one another.
Exactly. Yes, there's so much more that can be done. I have 2 clients now who are living with their children and their grandchildren, and sometimes they help. How it's working though is they're real clear. Sometimes grandma babysits, but not all. She's not there to be a babysitter, but she's also there. But she also has to keep her mouth shut when the kids aren't being disciplined properly. So, but they talk with each other about it and they work it out. And in these 2 situations, it's working out beautifully. And these are children who are growing up with their grandmothers. And that is such a blessing to be able to do. That is just such a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I agree. That's terrific.
Yeah.
Well,
did you have something to say, Greg?
No, I was thinking this is fabulous. I think there are lots of benefits from sharing a place. Even if you have a house, sometimes not everybody's going to be there. If you go on a trip, you don't have to worry about the house is going to be vacant for a month, right?
Exactly.
There's somebody there who can keep an eye on it, and yeah.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager, my mother left the house in our hands, which wasn't really a good idea, but it survived. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Like, if you have the flu one day, I mean, somebody can go get groceries. I mean, they're just even the little things.
Exactly.
So
yeah. Like I just went over to the post office and picked up everybody's mail this morning.
Yeah.
And it works.
It does. It does. Yeah.
And I like your arrangement, Betty, where you're in the house, but you're not necessarily dependent on doing everything together. If you can, if you want to, not, so.
Yeah. Exactly. And then if something does come up like torrential rainfall where people are needed to get out there and dig ditches in a hot hurry, there's enough people to do it,
Exactly.
Yeah. Run out to put out the fires.
Yes, that sort of thing. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, and this actually was that kind of work actually was how our country was built. I mean, we think now of, the Wild West and everybody was ruggedly independent, and that's really not how it was back then.
Not at all.
They had to check their guns at the outskirts of town. They didn't take them into town, and people were helpful with each other. I mean, there were people built barns for each other. They all got together and built a barn. I mean, we're not going to get back to that clearly, but there's so much that we've lost.
That way of thinking and that way of being is a very rich way of being. Like in the Big Sur area, 100 years ago, all people did was go to visit one another. They'd figure out who needed a barn. Everybody would go to their place and put it together. The women would swap sourdough. All the kids would play together. They'd do livestock trades, whatever. And that was like the entirety of how they did everything.
Yes.
Yeah. My grandparents had a farm in Alberta. And at that day, they started in the horse and buggy ages, but all of the farmers would go together and buy a some kind of tractor or a thrasher or something, so they
Mhm.
would have a shared resource.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think there is room for us to return to that. One thing that's really encouraging to me about some of the younger people, I noticed when I was hosting millennials for camping on my property the last couple of years that I was living there, that many of them, first of all, they lived in San Francisco, so they were sharing apartments. The rent was prohibitive. They were tech people, and they had things like car clubs. They did. Many of them didn't show up in their own car. They bought into a situation where if you need a vehicle, you go and you use the vehicle that everybody owns together.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's an intelligent way to look at it. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're living in the city, you don't need a car all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Have one.
Or
There-
even in the suburbs, you only mow your lawn once a week. Well, first place, lawns probably shouldn't exist, but if you have them, you only mow once a week. You don't need every house to have their own, and it takes a half an hour. Every house doesn't need to have their own lawnmower, but
Yeah.
Exactly.
In the Vancouver area, there's a lot of car sharing, like car to go and various things.
Mhm.
So that basically you have a card and you see a car is parked in your neighborhood, you go just get access to it and you drive it and they charge you, for per mile, something like that. Now they also have bicycles that are like that too, where you could
we
just
have the
check out
bicycles.
your bike and ride
Yeah.
it somewhere. In
Yeah, we have the
Kansas City, they had scooters, right? So the whole place is littered with abandoned scooters. But
We have bicycles and scooters
Right.
in Raleigh. They're around. You see, I mean, you kind of have to be lucky enough to see one if if you just want to go for a ride. It's not set up so that it's very dependable, but we have them. Yeah.
yeah. So there are lots of cooperative kind of approaches to things too, and many organizations run by volunteers are along following that line too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And,
So-
and, and technically, the people who are advocates of independent and assisted living, I mean, that's they don't call it cooperative living, but basically that's what they use to sell it. They're like, you'll never be alone again.
Yeah.
Only there are, instead of having like 3 or 4 other people, or, there's 500. So it's like, that gets, for some people,
Yeah.
that gets to be a bit much.
Yeah. Interesting process that last weekend I was visiting my friend whose parents live in town in an assisted living facility, and her father was in the hospital, and her mom was over there visiting. So we visited in her parents' apartment while she was there, being in town to see what was going to happen next. And it was a very nice place. Private patio right next to the boulevard. Her parents are both pretty deaf, so they didn't notice the traffic. She said that was fine, But I mean, for some people, it could be a great solution. There's a medical facility right across the way. But she also has told me more than once that she's not really happy with the kind of care that her dad is getting in the medical facility. When he gets out of the hospital, he goes into the rehab portion, and what I'm saying is it has its advantages and its drawbacks.
Yeah. Which everything does. So again, it gets down to knowing yourself, knowing what is a must for you, what you absolutely must have,
Yeah.
and knowing what you don't need at all, and knowing what it'd be nice to have, but you could live without. It gets down again to really knowing yourself that well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that encapsulates it. What would be nice to have, but you can live without. That's just about everything, isn't it?
Well, it pretty much is. Yeah, we've kind of gotten to we have gotten to the point where we think everything is a must-have. And
I know.
This
whole conversation is reminding me of a conversation that I had with my grandfather a number of years ago. And he was born in 1901, I think. He was orphaned at the age of 4, and then again at 9. So he was on his own at 9, but living with his family. And he was really uptight about. Well, he was expressing that everybody thinks they have to have all their own stuff now. It's stupid, he says. When I was a kid, if somebody had a house, we all moved in with them, and everybody had enough. Why does everybody think they got to have all their own stuff? It's just plain wasteful. And I went, oh, now you see what this whole hippie thing is all about, huh, Gramps?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting perspective, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
somebody wants to go off on socialism being evil, says, well, you want to get rid of the military and the fire service and the police and your
The
roads.
libraries, although there are people who want to get rid of the library, so I better watch out about
Whoa,
that.
oh, yeah, that's a hot topic. Who knew?
Yeah. But
Well,
yeah, I saw, this is kind of off the topic, but I saw something. It says that socialism is when the the fire department comes to put out the fire so your house doesn't burn down. Capitalism is when the insurance company doesn't want to pay your claim. So
Okay, that's going to be we're going to get letters.
I think well, you know what? I'll be happy to get letters, and
can't please everybody.
I know that was an exaggeration. So
no, but it's true. I'm in a networking group where their motto is happy to capitalism, and they had somebody talking about medical coverage, right? In Canada, we have pretty much universal health care, and most of those things we don't have to worry about. And as this person was talking about this, I was thinking, happy socialized medicine, you know.
Yeah.
But it is when you bring in, if you form anything taxpayer money goes into, like the military and fire service, all that sort of stuff, as a form of socialism, then that word kind of loses its impact for the people who want to use it as a weapon. So
Yeah.
But anyway,
anyway, that's our little distraction. Anyway, we've been talking about what we're going to talk about next week, and I think how we would relate this is somebody's got to keep the house afloat, right? So one of the reasons, as people get on, sometimes you have economical reasons why you can't stay in your own house or you need to move somewhere else. And one of the options that have come up is reverse mortgages. And I was just talking with somebody just about an hour ago about reverse mortgages in Ontario, in Canada. And she may want to come on to be the show. And Margo also has somebody wants to come and talk about reverse mortgages. So all sorts of creative ways of keeping the house going, and and then sharing it maybe with your golden friends.
Exactly. I mean, it's a matter of being creative and not not just saying I've got to do it this way. Almost any of the, like for instance, even independent and assisted living, it's a hybrid. I mean, they're not all the same. It's a matter because everybody wants to do it differently. So, but yes, reverse mortgages can be very good. I will suggest, and this is Ken, who is my guy, who I would love to have him come. I would love your friend on.
Yeah.
But one of the things he said was, and this I think goes across the board, is Henry Winkler may be a lovely guy and the Fonz was a cool guy, but don't get a reverse mortgage from a television advertisement, because you want somebody who's going to sit and talk with you and get you the right one. Or who, as my friend Ken does, who might even say to you, you know what, given why you want to do this, I don't think it's the best thing for you to do. So you want somebody who's going to do what's best, who's working for you. But other than that, I recommend it to a lot of people. Look into it. Anyway, so are we going to be talking about that next week? I mean,
I think that's going to be the theme next week, and we'll have at least one guest to come and talk about it. And
wonderful.
And, because that's our all the different options. And if you missed it, go back and watch the one on living on a cruise ship, because that may float your boat. So.
Greg is going to end up doing that. I can see that.
Well, we have a land yacht, which is an RV, and right. So we spend quite a bit of time just traveling that. So we're on the roads, but we do call it a land yacht.
It is. Well, but when I first heard about living on a cruise ship, I thought it was like an urban legend kind of a thing, and in fact, it happens, and for less money than you think, because the cruise ships they want to have their cabins filled. And they often don't have them all filled. So if you're going to be there 365 days a year, they'll give you a good deal.
Yeah. So two things. One is that the long cruise ships are less expensive than you might think. and living in assisted living or independent living can be much more expensive than you may be
Well,
thinking.
it is much more. Plus, which the other thing is that cruise ships have doctors and nurses on call 24 hours a day. Assisted living has nothing. So
Yeah.
you actually get better medical care on a
You
cruise
get
ship.
medical care, and if you don't survive the trip, you can get buried at sea for much
That's
less than
right.
it would be than at home.
Perfect. There you
Well,
go.
it's,
And
it's,
that
it's all
problem
good.
solved too.
That's it. That's
Well,
right.
It says here his last smile was during happy hour.
you are going to end up on that. Yeah, I mean, you love your land cruiser now, but you're gonna end up in the ocean someday. I know that, Greg.
We
Buried
never
at
know
sea.
where we're going next. I mean, if you told me 10 years ago that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I would have just said, no way.
But here you are. That's
Yeah,
right. That's right.
Everything changes.
Everything changes. Yeah. Yeah, it's all good. So,
Yeah.
well, so everybody, I'll put that little link in. Go visit Your Perfect Retirement Living.
.com.
Yeah, so that's where Margo's course is offered and described. And come back next week and see what learn about sort of reverse mortgages and other fun adventures. So
Reverse mortgages and other fun adventures. I love that.
yeah. Anyway, so everybody go off and enjoy your Saturday and have fun. Go spend some time with friends and family, and try not to get into too much trouble.
But make sure you get into enough trouble.
Enough trouble. Don't. Yeah, you don't have to be bored.
I like that one. Yeah. Keep a sense of proportion here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all relative. I usually ask people, are you keeping in trouble? Instead of are you keeping out of trouble? Are you keeping
I
in
like
trouble?
that.
Yeah.
I'll have to I'm going to steal that one. I like that.
Yeah,
I
I think
like that.
we have
I
some
was
natural
occasion
capability in that area.
I was at some occasion where, as I was leaving, someone who I'd known for a long time said, "Be good," and I looked at him like, "Are you mad?" And I
Yeah,
said,
really.
"Good?" And he went, and I said, "No." Somebody else likes to say, "Don't be good, have fun."
Yeah,
Yes.
fun, yeah.
Yeah. Why would
Bonnie
I
has
want to do that?
Bonnie has a T-shirt she wears at Christmas time. It says, "Be naughty, save Santa the trip."
I like
Nice. Yeah. Good.
that. I like that.
Good.
Well, guys, thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a lot of fun today. I like it.
Yeah, no, it's always fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We're all about fun.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Uh-huh.
okay.
Uh-huh.
Bye-bye.
Bye.